All right, very good. We're going to work with our second kind of array now. We've done the rectangular array. We're going to talk about polar array. And a polar array, well, an array is a pattern, right? And a rectangular array was a pattern of rows and columns from an original. So a polar array is when we take an original and put it in a circular pattern, like that chair going around the table there to make multiple chairs. This hole here represents a hole in a piece of gasket material, maybe rubber, neoprene, something like that. If we don't know what a gasket is, this is the kind of stuff we're talking about here. We have full face gaskets sometimes that require a hole completely through the rubbery material to make a tight seal in between flanges for piping. At other times, the bolt holes pass through the gasket, even though the metal part in the middle is the part that creates the seal. But what you can see here is we can see that all of these have a couple things in common, and the thing they have in common is they have an outside diameter and inside diameter, and then a bunch of holes in a circle going in a pattern around the edges. Some of them have multiple holes, and some of them have some of them have a lot of holes, and some have few holes. Like these small ones here have 4 holes, and the larger ones have 8 holes. And if we are careful and look around and spend some time in the piping industry, we'll see that flanges can have massive numbers of holes going around their periphery. It just depends on how big we're talking. Sometimes gaskets are small, 4-inch diameter, 3-inch diameter, 6-inch diameter, but sometimes they're gigantic. We see this turbine here for a dam. The number of holes going around the perimeter of this thing is just huge, right? So let's keep it simple though. Let's take a look at our little gasket or little flange we're making here. The inside of the pipe, the inside diameter is here, the outside of the flange is here, and we have our hole that the bolt's going to pass through. And my job is to go around and to create a number of holes. So traditionally, if we were doing this the hard way with a pencil and a piece of paper and some drawing tools, we'd have to draw lines across the quadrants. And then once you did that, you'd have to know a certain dimension called the bolt circle. And that's this purple line here. If you look close, it's a center line. And it indicates where the center point of that circle ought to be. So the center point of the circle lands right on the bolt circle. And every other circle, every other hole also would land on that line. So in this case, we wanted 4 of these small holes. Well, we could just copy them, right? Once we knew where to put them, we could take that first one and we could copy it. And we can copy it to there, we can copy it to there, and we can copy it to there. And of course, we don't even really need to draw the lines, do we? Because you guys know about quadrant snap. You could say, hey Willis, why are we bothering to draw lines when it's easily determined where those 4 quadrants are? And you're right. Drawing the lines goes back to drawing things by hand, old school style. The problem with that, though, of using quadrants is when we have 8 holes, or 12 holes, or 24 holes. Because if we had 8 holes, see, now we'd have to go in and we'd have to figure out, well, where does 45 degrees hit that bolt circle? And once you knew that, you go back in there and do some more copying. But until you knew that, you would want to randomly guess where to put them. They all need to be equally spaced. They all need to fall on that magenta colored bolt circle. And that looks pretty good, right? So this is no biggie. Drawing 4 circles around the perimeter of a larger circle on the quadrants, easy. But when we had 8 circles, we needed to do a little calculating. We had to know that 45 degrees would break this up into 8 segments. What if I asked you to do 12? Now what? Well, you'd have to erase everything you did here. You'd have to go in. You'd have to calculate the new angle, right? And we'd have to copy some more circles and put them in their new positions. And the idea is this is tedious. If we have to do that, it would be much easier if AutoCAD would automatically do it for us. And that's what we're going to talk about with our polar array. So in polar array, really simple. We're going to click on the tool. We're going to say, hey, give me that circle. Enter. It'll ask you where the center point of the array is, and that there is the center point of the array. And then right away, a whole bunch of stuff just happened, right? So right away, I see 6 circles now going around that center point along the bolt circle. I also see the color changed. That's kind of neat, huh? Or kind of weird, if you want to look at it that way. It was on layer 0, but when I made the array, since the construction layer was current, it put the array on the construction layer. All right, so we have a brand new object now in the scene. That's not 6 holes, not 6 circles. It's one object called an array. And an array has certain behaviors, right? We know the array is associative. So if we start changing values up here, and I say, hey, give me 8 holes, well, it'll change the number of instances out here on the screen, right? And if I say, hey, give me 12 circles, oh, not 812, although that looks cool too, right? How about 12? There we go. See, it's automatically going to update for us anytime we go in there and change the value. And why is that nice? Well, it's nice because if today someone tells me give me 12 holes through the gasket, and in a week they come back and say, oh shoot, it should be only 8, sorry, it's not a big deal, right? I change a number, the associative array updates, and we're back in action. All right, so what other things can we control with these polar arrays besides the number of items in the array? Well, you can control the angle in between the items, and we can control how much of the circle we want to fill. So let's do this. Let's make it 4 items in the array. We know that every 90 degrees out of 360, you'll have an instance of our circle. But if you could change these values, like if I change it to 180 degrees, you see now only half the circle is being filled with our items, right? And it's telling me, hey, there's 60 degrees in between each of those. Changing the values again, right? We have the world's worst gasket here. No clamp on this side, no clamp down or bolt down here, but lots of clamp down over here. 8 holes, there's 26 degrees in between, and it's 180 degrees filled from start to finish. All right, so this is a polar array. Kind of a cool item. The circle started on layer 0, but when we made the array, we were on layer construction. So we might ask, well, what layer is the array on? Is it on 0? See, it's not. It's on construction now, because that was the layer the items got transferred to when we created the array. All right, so just be aware of that. Your arrayed item switches to the current layer when the array is created. Now, there's something going on with this array that it's a little bit hard to see. Let's do this. Let's go back in and make it 360 degrees. Oh, you know what? Let's just do this. Let's just undo it. Go back to our original circle, right? Here it is. And I'm going to do something. I'm going to add a little tiny tick mark up here at the North Pole. All right, so now when I array, I'm going to array both of those items around that center point. And we'll go for 8 items. And here we go. And now do you see what's happening to the items while they are arraying around the center point? Really couldn't tell so much when it was just a circle, because circles are totally round, right? They're perfectly round. But do you see what's happening to the items when there's a little flat spot or a little line on there? Do you see how the items are rotating as they go around the circle? So you couldn't tell that with just circles because circles are round. But here we can see this little tick is at a different angle as it works its way all the way around that bolt circle. A little more dramatic would be if we took our triangle here and did an array around the bolt circle. Do you see how this triangle is pointing up, and this one is pointing out at 60 degrees, and this one is pointing down at 60 degrees. This one's pointing at 180. Right, so what's going on? Why is it doing that? Well, it's copying it, and it's also rotating it along that round path as it copies. Now, this looks nice, but if you don't want that, you can turn that off. For example, let's take a look at some of our controls over here about the polar array. One of them is called rotate items. So if you turn that button off, right now it's blue, if you click on it and turn it off, Do you see how now the triangles are pointing straight up? All of them? They're all pointing in the same direction. There's no rotation happening now, right? How about this one here? If I go and I say, hey, turn off rotation. See, now the little tick mark is pointing straight up in the Y direction on all of them. All right, so you might want to rotate or not rotate your items as you're working. That's kind of dependent on what you're working on. And then if you were only filling part of the circle, you have a button for direction. See, right now the array is going counterclockwise. Click on the direction button. Now the array is going clockwise. So here's a couple of controls that might come in handy while you're working with these associative arrays. Over here we have an N, and through the magic of Hollywood I want to turn this into a compass, right? Like a compass rose with the north arrow pointing north. So I think you get the idea of what we would want to probably try to do. I drew a couple of lines here, and I want to make lines in each direction, right? So I don't have to draw more lines, I can just make an array of lines. We'll ask it for 4. Now that looks snazzy, right? Okay, and I have an N up here for north. Well, I want east, south, and west. So I will do an array of the letter N around the center point, and I'll ask for 4. And now take a look, kind of wacky. The N is pointing up here. The N is pointing sideways here. It's rotated 90 degrees. The N is upside down here, and it's rotated 270 degrees here. You can't really see it too well, though. Looks like a Z. So let's do this. Let's turn off the rotation. Here we go. Much better. North, east, south, west. So how can I change the N to an E, and the N to an S, and the N to a W? Well, normally when we want to edit text, if we have some text on the screen, it's no biggie. We've done enough text editing at this point where you can double click on text. Click, click. And when the text editor opens up, you're able to go in there and change. You can change one letter to another. You can correct spelling mistakes. You can make adjustments, right? You're not going to notice that's not going to happen, though, when we try to double click on the E for east. See, because right now, if you double click on it, it says, look, this is an array. I don't know what you're trying to do, but I wish you'd stop. Could you not please, right? So I double click on the N and the same thing. I can't change that to an S, and I can't change that to a W. So why is that? Why can I change this text when I can't edit any of these pieces of text? And the answer, quite simply, is because it's not text anymore, right? It's an array. So there is a way of going in, and there is a way of editing just one item here. A couple of things that we could do. But unfortunately, they're all very violent. So if you want to edit text in an array, you can go to the Home tab after you select the array and explode the array. Now, when you explode the array, these things just turn back into text. Okay? And then you can go in and do the editing. So I'll change that to an E. I'll change this guy to an S. And I'll change this guy to a W. Okay, but what have we lost by exploding the array? When you click on these items, look, the ribbon is not changing. AutoCAD doesn't recognize that this is an array, or ever was an array, or ever could be again an array, because we've broken it. Explode is kind of permanent like that, which is why we tell you to use it with caution. Here, this array brings up those associative controls, right? And I can change the parameters to change the look and appearance and characteristics of the array. But once it's exploded, same deal. We would lose all that forevermore. So explode turns the array back into its component geometry, or in this case, its component text, which is nice in one way because it lets you edit the geometry or the text. Not so nice in another way, though, because we lose the ability to go in and modify it later. All right, so what else do we have over here to play around with? We've got our giant gasket, our giant flange. I take a look at this outlet here on this dam and just imagine the number of studs on here to keep this thing all bolted up. And that's a lot. That's an awful lot of holes. So we don't have to go that crazy here. We can just throw a quick array on that small circle. And we can find our center point, and we can say, give me 36. 36 is way too many, right? So about 24. There we go. That's a little bit more reasonable, right? So this might be some gigantic 12-foot diameter facing on a valve, large valve, and those are our bolt holes going through it. And of course our little example there, when we hover over the array command, it shows us what it can do after a click or two, right? So we can take our chair, same idea, and find the center of the table, and then say, okay, well, we have 8 partners in this business, there's only 6 chairs, let's add a couple of chairs. Right, and then if we wanted to go in and we wanted to make changes, if we want to leave one place blank, like the Knights of the Round Table, well, we'd have to explode to make that modification. And unfortunately, we lost our ability to ever go in there and change up the angle by exploding. But that's okay. So here we have our polar array command and the basic idea of how it's used. Some things to remember about arrays: when you create the array becomes part of whatever layer is current. It leaves its original layer. If you are making a polar array, the items are rotating, revolving as they go around the center point. And you can turn that off if you want. You can also change the direction if you only want to go in one direction. And then text has to be exploded to get back to a point where it can be edited. Alright, so this is a discussion on polar array.